Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm not buying books this year. Today I'm here to talk about my March TBR. So today I'm going to talk about my March TBR. This TBR concept has worked a lot better than I had expected. I think it didn't go quite as well in February as it did in January, but I can't blame the books for that. The books were all great. It's just February was a short month and I picked some really long books. So I was a little more mindful this time when choosing books of their length. So you'll be able to see some of these are obviously quite short, especially the ones for, I will talk about the little reading challenge a little bit later in the video. So why don't we just go ahead and get into the books. The first one is another Romanceopoly pick. This is for the Taxi Square. The hosts of this challenge, like I found with, I'm sorry, I feel terrible saying this, a lot of booktubers, I don't read the same things that a lot of these people do. And so I went through their list of recommendations because the Taxi Square, you have to pick one of their recommendations, and I had a really hard time finding something that I had on my TBR. And of course I'm not buying books this year, so I really couldn't, just go out and buy something, and I didn't really want to just go to the library and pick something up. So I really looked through everything and I finally found one. So that's Firelight by Kristen Callahan. This is a historical paranormal. I tried to read this a few years ago after I got obsessed with Callahan's Rockstar series. And what I really wanted was more of her Rockstar series. And so I tried to sort of substitute with this historical paranormal series, and it didn't work. But now that I'm not like craving rock stars, I'm hoping that her voice will carry this for me. The next book is for Austen Rowe, and it's supposed to be a classic romance. And the way that they've framed the term classic has been something like Jane Austen, Bronte, Hare, those sorts of folks. I could certainly pick something by those authors, although I've read everything that Jane Austen's written, and everything that the Brontes have written, frankly, at least the major things. I could read a Georgette Hare, but I would have to get it from the library, and again, I'm sort of resisting that as much as I can. So instead, I picked up this. Just wait. This is worth it. This book is called Graduate Nurse. It's by Anne Rush. It is a Ace paperback, very short, from 1956. I don't think this is actually the original printing of this book. I think this is a 60s printing. But this is one of a few very early American category romances. It just happens to be something that I found in a thrift store in rural Virginia, like a lot of my collection. And I've never read it, partly because it's not in hugely great shape. I'm kind of afraid that reading it, the pages might start to fall out. So I'm going to have to be really careful when I read this. But it's your typical love, I would call it a love triangle, except that the graduate nurse of the title, I think, has 3 different men after her in, let me just double check here, 135 pages? 125 pages. So this will be interesting to see how they resolve that. I'm not entirely sure that this is going to end up being a genre romance. I don't know about happy endings or how they're going to work this out, but let's find out. The next square is the Growing Pains Place square, which is to read a YA romance. Now, for the vast majority of BookTube, this would be super easy. Everyone has a ton of YA on their shelves and probably would have no trouble picking out a book by a favorite author. I don't read YA at all, really. I've read The Hunger Games and Twilight and does Harry Potter count? Anyway, I basically read things as big boobies have come out, and other than that, I really don't read YA. But I do collect category romance. So I have collected a couple of YA category romances. I think this is actually the newest one that I have. So this is called I Do. It's by Elizabeth Chandler. It's about a hero and a heroine who meet at the heroine's cousin's wedding, and of course the hero is the biggest jerk in school, and it sounds like Sweet Valley High, and I'm here for it. The next book is, or the next square for Romanceopoly is College Row, and I'm reading a new adult romance set in college. That's what the square is. Again, I don't read a lot of new adult. I do have a few Serena Bowen books on my TBR that I bought years ago. She has historically been very hit and miss for me, but I'm going to go ahead and give a try to The Year We Fell Down. People that I like and respect have very mixed opinions on this book. I suspect I will also have mixed opinions on this book, but I'm going to try it. The next challenge that I'm fulfilling is Steph Romance Book Talks Blackout Challenge. I'm reading 2 books by Black authors a month. This month I chose A Duke by Default by Alyssa Cole because my library hold of the audiobook, and I really loved A Princess in Theory in audio. So that's the first book in the Reluctant Royal series. I loved that in audio, so I went ahead and reserved the second book, even though I already own it in ebook. This is Naledi of the first book, her best friend Portia, her story. And I hear there's a sword maker involved. It sounds euphemistic. It's not. I think he actually is a sword maker, like a blacksmith. Anyway, I always love Alyssa Cole, and I'm sure this will be great. The next book is Sin and Ink by Naima Simone. I had asked on Twitter a week or so ago what the sexiest book that people read in 2018 or 2019 was. And this book came up so many times. I actually didn't own it. But at the end of February, I did receive a gift card from my Amazon affiliate program, and there's more information on that down below if you have questions about that. And I'll link my rules of my challenge up here so that you can see kind of I'm not violating my no buy. This is a fully acceptable purchase. Black authors are underrepresented in the romance market, and so I am allowed to go ahead and purchase this book. When I do, it will be my first book purchase of 2019. Eee! So this will happen sometime in March, and I'm sure there will be much fanfare on Twitter and other places. If you don't follow me on Twitter, it's Elisabeth J. Lane, and I'm on there more than I should be. So if you want to come find me, please do. The next challenge is also Steph's challenge, and I'll link her channel below. This is Romance Genre-a-thon, and Steph put a lot of really great thought into this because this month's challenge is to read an Irish or Scottish book, so a book with an Irish or Scottish connection. And this is a book I failed to read in January. This is The Secret by Julie Garwood. This is set in the Scottish Highlands, and the hero is a Scottish barbarian. Very typical of like 1992-ish historical romance. This is a book that I'm pretty sure I read in high school, but I'm going to go ahead and revisit it, and hopefully it holds up. Okay, next challenge. This is the Buzzword-a-thon, and this is our Buzzword Readathon. I found out about this through Chelsea Dolling Reads, and I'll link her channel below. This is, the challenge is March 18th through March 23rd, and it's to read books with who, what, when, where, how, and why in the title. So I'm going to breeze through these ones really quickly because, frankly, for the most part, the reason that I chose them was that they had the right word in the title. A lot of these are category romances. Unsurprising because I have a lot of category romances, and of course category romances have to have new titles every time. They can't put the same title in the lines over and over again, so they use a lot of words. So I think anybody doing any kind of challenges with like romance challenges, they often gravitate to categories because it does make it easier. So I'm gonna, like I said, breeze through these. So this is a 1999 Harlequin Temptation. This is by Jill Shalvis. It's called Who's the Boss? And it is, as you can see, sassy. I bought this when we were in New Orleans on vacation, actually, at a thrift store in New Orleans. It's like a poor little rich girl gets, like, I don't know, her first office job. and she doesn't really know what she's doing, and so of course she falls in love with her boss, I guess. The next one is Whatever It Takes by Barbara Boswell. This is one of my many, 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 many vintage love swepts. This one is from 1986. I kind of collect these and the Dell Candlelight Ecstasies. These are my two favorite sort of, I don't know, they're not at all obscure, but if you've never heard of them before, they're going to sound semi-obscure. They're what Harlequin is, but they're no longer publishing. The next book that I have is by Betty Neals. This is When May Follows. Betty Neals writes the best food in the business. There's a ton of foodie romances. It's practically its own subgenre, but I've never read a meal like Betty Neals writes. And this one's a marriage of convenience. So in addition to it being the right title, it's got one of my favorite tropes. And then finally, Where the Wind Blows Free by Emily Spencer. This is a 1984 Harlequin romance. The notable thing about this is that it's set in Texas, which for this period in Harlequin's history is slightly more rare. They had just started publishing Harlequin American romance. That's not one of these. This is just an actual Harlequin romance. Yeah, U.S. set romance, not super common in this period in Harlequin's history. And then for How, I have How to Be Alive. This is by Mary Chris Escobar. Mary Chris is actually a friend of mine, and she gave me this book at RWA in 2015. Sorry, Mary Chris. I put it in a stack with all those other books, and they got buried. And so I dug it out when I moved everything onto my shelves, and I was like, ooh, I finally get to read Mary Chris's book. So that's going to be my How. And then for Why, I am going to blatantly cheat. I could not find a Why in my entire 569 book paperback collection. So I'm going to read the second Wyborn and Griffin novel. This is by Jordan Hawk. The second book is Threshold. These are romances featuring a Pinkerton detective and a budding wizard / academic. And they're set in a Lovecraftian universe where they battle eldritch monsters, and luckily without all of the racism and homophobia and misogyny. What happened with these is that my husband loves them, and so he took possession of my Kindle and read all of them. So I kind of forgot where I was, and so I'm gonna catch up a little bit on this series. The final book on my list, and I'm going with 14 this time, and I'll explain that in a minute as to why, when I actually really need to read 16 books this month. This is Hidden Obsession by Joanne Rock. This is a Harlequin Blaze. This is part of a set of, I think, 3 very rare time-traveling Harlequin Blazes. It's called The Pleasure Chest. Featuring Steed O'Flannery, the time-traveling pirate who's trapped in a painting. And he has all these buzzwords, Sweet Sons of Liberty, Sweet Betsy Ross. If this one is half as cheesy as that, I am going to be very, very pleased. Sorry, Joanne, if you're watching this, I don't actually hope your book is cheesy. No, actually, I kind of do. I really love, I love Harlequin Blaze because they're sexy, and they did seem to go through a period, a kind of bonkers, wacky period, and that's one of these, and I can't resist them. So that is my TBR for March. As I said, I really do need to be reading about 16 books off of my TBR in order to kind of keep pace with my 200 book reading challenge for the year. But what I found last month was that there are, number one, sort of bookish cravings. Like I'll finish a book by an author and then I'll immediately want to move on to the next one. Or if I have library holds come in, I put things on hold that attract my attention or that I'm allowed to get from the library, and then the library hold comes in, but I want to read it then so that then I can return it, and the timing doesn't always work out. So I'm leaving myself a little bit of a 2-book window here, which is probably not quite enough, but we're gonna go with that and see if we can make that work. So there is my incredibly random TBR for March. There is not a normal book on this list. It is all wacky stuff, but that is the majority of my current paperback, especially my paperback collection. So I hope this has been entertaining. I hope it'll be fun to watch me try to read all these books in March. I know it'll be fun for me to see how far I can get. Have a great week. Doubt not, slay some words, and Lex has your back. Bye.